The October 23rd, 2024 meeting of the Wilmington School Committee. All members are in attendance with the exception of Dr. McCaldy, who is unable to join us this evening. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Going this way. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on our agenda this evening, welcoming back our student representative presentations. I'm thrilled to announce Shubhangi Tripathi as our new student representative. She's going to present to us tonight with Jackson Kiley. So Jackson, whenever you're ready, come on down. Thrilled to have you guys here. Looking forward to hearing what's going on at the high school.
Hello everyone, thank you for having us. My name is Shubhangi. I'm a senior at the high school and will be representing the high school this year.
I'm Jackson Kiley and I'm a junior at the Wilmington High School. As of October 8th, Wilmington High School proudly welcomed 18 French students along with 2 teachers from Lycée Jeanne d'Arc in Normandy, France. These students attended classes alongside their host students and engaged in various activities including potlucks, sports, classes, and classes like ceramics and photography.
This past Saturday, Wilmington High School students participated in a Model UN Nations competition at St. John's Prep, where they represented different countries and discussed pressing global issues.
College visits for seniors have continued, offering them valuable opportunities to meet with admission counselors from various colleges. This week, notable universities such as Sacred Heart University and the University of Connecticut will be at the school during Flex Block to connect with students.
As part of the Wilmington Parent/Guardian University offerings, seniors had the chance to attend Financial Aid Night on October 17th. This event, hosted by the Wilmington High School counselors, featured Mr. Michael Huddy, a financial aid representative from the Harvard Division of Continuing Education.
Looking ahead, the next event hosted by the Wilmington Parent/Guardian University will be on October 28th, which will focus on families navigate student depression and anxiety, discussing the effects and symptoms, as well as ways to provide support.
For the 3rd consecutive year, middle school students and their parents will visit Wilmington High School this Tuesday. Over 200 8th graders will be guided by Wilmington High School peer mentors, who will introduce them to the school's various offerings. Later that day, the program will be repeated for parents to familiarize them with the high school's schedule and environment.
In an effort to give back to community, WHS students participated in the Reader Leader program, visiting Woburn Street Elementary School to read to younger students in Miss Owens and Miss Martin's class.
On October 4th, the school counseling office welcomed Comfort Dogs, providing students with the opportunity to spend time with these friendly animals.
The MTSS overview and webinar was held on October 22nd, detailing the 3 levels of academic behavioral interventions and supports available at WHS. The staff, including assistant principals and school counselors, closely monitored students' progress and offered additional support, encouraging families to reach out with any questions.
The Environmental Club organized a school ground cleanup on October 11th, contributing to a cleaner and healthier environment at the high school.
Additionally, on October 1st, 6 WHS student athletes represented the school at the 2024 Leadership and Allyship in Sports Forum hosted by the Middlesex Attorney's Office.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you. Clearly a quiet couple of weeks at the high school. Yeah. Questions? Mr. Turner.
So thank you very much. Great. I appreciate all the updates. One actual suggestion more than a question. In terms of a fundraising opportunity, as a parent of a senior, I went to the financial aid night. If you ever want to have a cookie drive, parents are ready to binge eat sugar before and after financial aid night. I promise you, somebody could make a lot of money, both in and out that door with all the parents, because there's some good quality stress coming out of that meeting.
We'll keep that in mind.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, moving along, we have approval of items by consensus, approval of minutes, October 9th, 2024, acceptance of a donation from Symbiotic for auditorium sound equipment. We have warrants, grants 13, revolving 21 through 25, local 34 through 41, food service 18 through 21, circuit breaker 07, special education 15, 16, and 17, and payroll 10/23/2024. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, can we actually pull the minutes separately?
Sure. Okay. So, approval of all of the above listed items minus minutes for October 29th, 2024. Is there a motion?
So
Mr.
moved.
Turner, seconded by Mr. Samaha. All those in favor?
One quick discussion question?
Please.
Sorry, just a quick, for my clarification, the sound equipment, was that for the high school or the middle school? The donation?
I thought it said in here.
I didn't see that.
Isaac is the one.
He's the auditorium, so it's gonna be the high school? Cool, thank you, that's all.
Okay.
Sorry.
So all of the items minus the minutes, approval was, motion was made and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Back to minutes from October 9th, 2024. Is there a motion? Mr. Samaha, second by Dr. Bryson. All those in favor? And abstentions? Mr. Ragsdale abstained, so that's 5-1. Thank you, David, I forgot about that. Right, that is the consent agenda. Moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Brand, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. The two items tonight under the report, and I'll go in order, starting first with the opportunity to introduce to the committee and our community those that are serving in new leadership roles, both at the district and school level. So we have 5 folks who are here tonight, and if I can ask them to kindly come forward, just so that our cameras can capture them. Come on forward, folks. Yeah, come on forward.
Come on down, don't be shy.
Aaron and Christine.
I'll take an opportunity briefly and introduce them to you. This information is included in the packet, and of course, their respective communities or the district at large has already been introduced to them. But first, we'll start on my left and welcoming Mr. Walsh, who is the principal at the West Intermediate School. Mr. Walsh has over 14 years of public education experience, most recently serving as the assistant principal of the Emily G. Weatherby School in Lawrence, and prior to that role, he held the Dean of School Climate and Culture for that same school. We welcome here, obviously, he joined our school community following the recent retirement of Dr. Foster, so we welcome Mr. Walsh here tonight. Next in line, Mr. Michael Kneibel. He's serving as the Wilmington Middle School interim assistant principal. Mr. Kneibel has over 25 years of school leadership experience, serving as both a principal and as assistant principal at the secondary level. From July 2011 to 2022, he was the principal of the Lenox Memorial High School, and before that, from 2004 to 2011, the assistant principal of East Longmeadow High School. And so we certainly welcome him as he moves into essentially Mr. Kyra's role, who obviously we're going to get to next. You know Mr. Kyra, certainly not a new face here, but he has stepped into the interim role, as you know, as the principal of the middle school. He has 10 years of public education experience as an educator at the Wilmington Middle School here in our district, and 4 years serving in his current role as the assistant principal. This time of transition is a perfect opportunity for stability, and we thank Mr. Kyra for his willingness to transition to the role and working with Mr. Faircloth and obviously Mr. Kneibel for the leadership of the middle school going forward. Moving along our line of newbies, so to speak, our interim director of student support. No, we're going to skip. We'll come back to her in a second. Behavioral health and social emotional support. Erin Dunham is here. Also not a new face to you and to our community, but new to this position as she steps into the interim role vacated by Ms. Murray, who we'll get to in a moment. Ms. Dunham, you'll recall, joined Wilmington Public Schools in July of 2021 as a social emotional learning and family engagement specialist. You'll recall that this was one of the new positions that, with your support, we created in the wake of COVID in an effort to try and help guide the recovery of our students and families. She's done a great job with us over the past number of years and has become a very friendly and welcome face throughout the community, and so we're glad that she stepped into this role, and we are so fortunate to have her continue with us. And last but not least, Ms. Murray, not a new face also to you, but with the utmost respect for her transition into this interim position, she has stepped up and willingly take on the interim role of Director of Student Support Services in the recent departure of Miss Alice Brown-Legrand. She began her career here a few years ago, in 2000, in the Wilmington Public Schools. Most recently, though, has served as the coordinator of behavioral health and social emotional support since 2017. These folks help, along with our other members of our district and extended leadership team, to chart the course and navigate the programs and services of our 8 schools each and every day. We're fortunate to have them. You're fortunate to have them, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce them to our community. The next item tonight is item 5B, student cell phone use. There's a memo that accompanies this in your packet. As outlined there, something that I've commented on most recently in the district's October newsletter, and the topic of student cell phone use, not one that anyone has not heard an awful lot about recently. Certainly, I think there's in fact been a spike of attention more recently from the headlines in terms of education that I see, and I'm sure many do across the country. There's probably a number of reasons that have driven this, this sort of, I don't think it's a resurgence per se, but certainly greater attention. And undoubtedly that's around the research that continues to emerge around their impact on student well-being and certainly student learning in the classroom. So all of that said, as I outlined in the memo, I think it's time for us as a school community to take stock of where it is that we stand and where it is that we want to be relative to student cell phone use or cell phone use in school at large. And my suggestion, as noted, is to establish a working group to help chart this course for our community and to, in turn, for you as a school committee, certainly if what is to emerge at the end of this is possible policy that would obviously be connected to your role as school committee. You can see the suggestion around a tentative plan for this working group. Certainly our interim coordinator of behavioral health, Ms. Dunham, has kindly taken my request and has willingly going to help lead this effort. But you can see the additional stakeholders that I would suggest would be invaluable in this effort: educators, of course, students, thinking specifically at the middle and high school students, parents, guardians, and caregivers, principal, assistant principal in terms of representation for our school leadership, and the thought of perhaps a will for this committee to have a liaison to this committee. I'm not proposing this as a subcommittee of the school committee. Certainly that would be in your purview if you wished to do so. The tentative timeline I've suggested there, starting November 1st for a call for volunteers, and if all goes well, culminating in April with a final recommendation to the school committee here. So I'm sure there perhaps are some questions or thoughts, and I welcome those in terms of helping form this that would best represent your thoughts and ideas as we move forward.
Very good, thank you. I'll take questions. I just want to take a step back and say either welcome to the district or thank you for stepping up to those of you who are in new or interim roles. So you're appreciated, so thank you. And thank you for being here. We appreciate that as well. So,
I just want to mention we have 2 family
please.
specialists with us tonight, Kelsey Tower and Sarah Leverone, who also joined us.
Welcome as well. I noticed you hid in the back and didn't join the rest of them. I can appreciate that. All right, sorry. Questions, comments from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
So I have, first one's a question actually more for Mr. Golden, and we should have asked it last week, or 2 weeks ago, but I didn't cross my mind, I didn't look ahead to the agenda. Is there anything happening either from the State House level or DESE level as Commonwealth-wide directive? Some states have been a bit more assertive in this sort of area, for better and worse. I'm not necessarily suggesting they should, but it wouldn't be a great idea for us to spend a good amount of time this year if 6 months later, the state is going to be dropping in some piece of legislation that says school districts shall, do X, Y, Z. So if you don't know, could we at least ask the question of our representatives to see what they see in the forecast for state level activity?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, there was not any legislation filed last session, the session that just ended, relating to this topic. I would wager that this is not, given that they only pass like 8 bills a year, that this is not going to be one. But I will double check with our delegation as to whether this is in the mix.
Thank you. And then 2 other requests/questions.
Sure.
I definitely think, I know we do surveyitis on this, but getting distinct feedback from parents, students, teachers on this topic, I think is really important. I think and the other side of that is I think we should have more parents and students, potentially either something like 2 from 5th grade of each, 3 or 4 each from the middle school, and 3 or 4 each from the high school. There's pretty diverse types of opinions. When I've talked to folks in town, there are some who are very, very excited about the possibility of reductions of use, and some who are, why would you collectively punish all the students for bad behaviors of a few? And so there's such a wide range of opinions that I think both the survey and a little bit more, and I know the bigger the group, the harder it is to manage and schedule and all these things, but if we took the time for the surveys, we might be able to get some good information and then got a few more people around the table. I would expect we will have a decent number of volunteers, and I expect it might be kind of polarizing group. But if we want to have something we can actually take action on and then have success implementing, the hardest part of this is going to be any implementation. Whatever we choose to do, we're going to frustrate somebody, a lot of somebodies, any way we go with this. So the more we can get buy-in ahead of time and the more we can plan a rollout, the better.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. I totally agree. I think when this came up at our retreat, right, so this really started, well, it started before that, but I think we spent a lot of time talking about this at our retreat, trying to figure out which way to go. Was it something that should just go to policy? I think it was at that retreat that we decided some kind of a working group with buy-in from the community, from students, from families, from teachers and staff seemed to make the most sense. So I'm really excited to see this here. I agree with you that I think we need more student representation, and because if we want this to really, I was kind of hoping it would be kind of like student grown, like the students would say, we want to do something about this, and I feel like it's the best way for us to get buy-in and then know as a policy subcommittee the direction to really move in, as opposed to it feeling like kids are kind of being dragged in there and maybe giving their opinion, maybe not, or maybe you have a subset of kids who are all in agreement. I just want to make sure we're really getting, so I totally agree. I would up those numbers, especially from the students. I think I'd probably want to have more than one school committee person on that as well, just because it is going to come back to that policy subcommittee, and I think it's going to be easier if some of us are in that space, hearing and working through this. I go back to that homework committee from years and years ago, and having people on that homework committee was really helpful when it came back to us, so I would just make those recommendations, but I'm really excited to see it here. I think it's time for us to get into this, so thank you.
So I'll just say that I'm very excited that we're having this conversation. I went to a high school where there were significant limits on cell phone use. Obviously, I'm one person, right, with one perspective, but I do think that, folks are aware of the public health implications of this. It is a public health issue on top of like discipline and everything else. But I agree with my colleagues. I honestly think I love surveys. I don't know about you, but I think people, especially students, like if there's a survey in the school, I don't know, Shubhangi, if you have any thoughts on it, but I feel like people would be raring to go to take a survey if it's how cell phones are going to be used. Because I feel like if I were told, don't use a cell phone in school, blanket, I'd be like, well, I don't like that I didn't get a voice in this, but there's probably a mix of perspectives, so I'd be interested to hear what you think your fellow students think.
I think surveys would be a great idea to get feedback from what students are thinking. Personally, my biggest issue probably with limitations on cell phone use is I've seen online, a lot of schools have they're like this, it's like a cage to put your phones in. So I want to be able to contact my family and my parents in cases of emergencies. So definitely putting limitations, but we have to figure out what limitations we should put. So getting feedback from the town and students and parents definitely would help in making that decision.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, surveys are cool.
So,
Well said, Mr. Ragsdale.
Just following on from Mr. Turner's comment before, although a year or two ago there were some grants that were given out from DESE regarding schools who were interested in pursuing some things like these Yonder pouches, which is kind of one example, probably the most commonly well-known one of what Shivani was talking about. But since then, there hasn't seemed to be any action at the state level at DESE. I have not seen anything on Board of Elementary and Secondary Education agendas or really heard anything at the agency towards that. So I think that at the moment, there doesn't seem to be anything on the horizon from the DESE side.
Thank you. Sorry, two more things. One, to Dr. Bryson's point, some of what I've heard in some different locations, parents are actually, some cases, more of a challenge getting on board than students.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting mix, an interesting dynamic on that side, and so I'd be curious how to manage both pieces of that. And the other thing is I would want to at least lay out there on the earlier side that we don't necessarily need to assume there's a one-size-fits-all for all grades, that whatever we decide, there might be variations in different sorts of things that might be appropriate at high school versus middle school versus 4th, 5th grades and those sorts of ages. So there could be a lot of different scenarios that could play out.
Sorry, can I go now?
Of course you can.
Sorry, I don't like when people do this, so I'm sorry, but I think that the education piece is huge, right? I think that not just thinking about, you can't use it here, you have to use it, I think more just thinking about what are the ramifications of social media. I think there's a lot of pieces that can go into this, right, Erin? Like, I think like there's so much that belongs here, and I don't want to just come away with a policy that says, so you can't do it here, and put it, I really want people to think through, like, what are we really thinking about here? It's not just holding the phone, it's more than that. So I'm excited, I think this working, again, I think the working group's a great idea, and I'm super excited to see how it all comes together. All right, we're good.
Yeah. All right. No, I mean, I would say I agree. I would sort of second or third or fourth, whatever at this point, this idea that it's not necessarily student-driven, but certainly significant student input. But I also would caution that this could be a significant time commitment, so I just want to make sure that we're, upfront with the folks who are engaged in this, that, the expectation is that they're going to commit to this, and so, because I do think it's important to get that perspective, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to, and for those of us on the committee who may be interested in participating, think about it, and certainly let Jen and I and Dr. Brand know as this forms up, so.
Thank you.
Good? Yes. Very good. Okay. Thank you as always, Dr. Brand. The next item on our agenda is public comment.
Oh, actually, before we leave that, could I make
Please.
one more comment?
Of course you could.
Just as a suggestion from past times that we've done this, that especially if we're considering the potentially a quite large working group, that breaking that down into subgroups that have different tasks. So one group, may be doing research on what other communities and districts and states have done, or just what research says. Someone else is focusing more on the community engagement aspect and on survey questions and so forth, is one way to kind of, spread the work out a little bit, but also to make it a little bit easier for the meetings to happen, because it doesn't have to be when can 25 people all meet at the same time. But the smaller groups with a particular task can also schedule their meetings. So I would recommend that.
It's an excellent point. Thank you. Okay. Now, moving along to public comment. Is there anybody that'd like to make a public comment? Come on up.
Where would you like me to go, up here?
Right to the microphone here is great. We'd ask you to state your name and address for the record, and if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Can everyone hear me okay?
We can.
So my name's Christine Nally. I know many faces in this room. And I want to say thank you for welcoming me here tonight in honor of Dyslexia Awareness Month. So October is a lot of special things, and to me, near and dear, it's dyslexia. So I do have a couple parents here that came in support. So I'm just going to go through my little spiel, and I'll make it quick. So back in September of 2016, the United States Senate designated October as National Dyslexia Awareness Month and called on Congress, districts, educational agencies to recognize that dyslexia has a significant educational implication and must be addressed. Dyslexia is the most common specific learning disability that is neurological in origin, occurs in people of all ethnic backgrounds and intellectual levels. It does not mean that you read words backwards, it's not fixed with colored glasses, and it's not something that you outgrow. Although my child graduated from WPS many years ago, I continue to advocate for children, young and old, and I get excited when I see some progress movement. As we know, progress comes painfully slow and in small increments. As of 2019, Mass state law required that the Department of Ed, Secondary Education, in consultation with the Department of Early Ed and Care, issue guidelines to assist districts in developing screening procedures or protocols for students that demonstrate one or more potential indicators of a neurological learning disability, including but not specific just to dyslexia. So research has proven earlier the identification and intervention, better the outcome at treating these children. This is problematic for districts such as ours here in Wilmington. It's problematic, it requires budgeting resources and staff that we currently struggle to meet. How do we as parents, educators, and administrators not only screen and identify our young students' weaknesses and the skills needed to learn to read, but now select the most effective interventions that should be used? In the past, districts have waited. They've waited to see if these young, struggling readers develop into readers and see if it's developmental in nature, waiting till 2nd or 3rd grade. This is too late. We've learned it's too late. The research shows it's too late. So I'm excited that at the kindergarten level, we're doing what we need to as far as screening. What I come to you as is the interventions that are used and how it's passed out to the parents. So I recently attended a viewing of an award-winning documentary titled The Right to Read, the greatest civil right issue of our time, presented by the Reading CPAC, a powerful story of a small-town teacher creating her own curriculum to teach her class how to read. The film was followed by a discussion panel, a couple of names. Michael Moriarty is a member of the Board of Elementary and Second Ed, Catherine Tarka, a Director of Literacy and Humanities from Mass DESE, and including supports of teachers to determine the quality of curriculum materials. I was informed of a new language-based program offered by Reading Public Schools. It's titled LEAD, and I do have some handouts that I'll leave for you. Language, Executive Function, Academics, Determination. I was informed that this new program is offered for grades 2nd to 12 and requires direct, explicit, multisensory, systematic, specialized, intensive approaches to support literacy, executive functioning, and social-emotional supports. At the conclusion of this program, I introduced myself to the school superintendent and also to the chairman of the board. They're willing to speak with Wilmington. Let's work together. At this time, Reading has designated the resources. There's a literacy team in each of their schools. They're dedicated to making a change district-wide. They are moving toward in the right direction and are willing to share all that they are doing. Let's take advantage, let's reach out, let's teach our kids to read with no more excuses. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And can I just drop these?
Please, yep.
So they're doing a lot of exciting things. They've been able to really make this a priority. And I did look up the superintendent. He does have a lot of SPED background, and I think that's where it's all stemming from, is their superintendent. So it's near to Deer and him, and they're making some great changes. It'd be nice if we could get on board.
This is
Thank
great.
you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Other public comments? Okay, thank you. Moving on to new business items, with no objection from the committee, we're going to take things a little out of order and do D, the accountability and MCAS presentation with Ms. Elliott first. As she gets ready, I will say, as we often do to those who are not presenting, you're more than welcome to stay. Certainly, we won't be offended if you decide to go. So, Ms. Elliott, when you are ready.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'm excited to be here to present to you the accountability and MCAS results from the 23-24 school year. As you know, we received the results, our MCAS results in the spring, in the summer, and then in early fall, and we're able to pull together all that data, and we do a lot of work with analyzing it. Actually, we're scheduled to do that next week, as a matter of fact, during our early release day. So today, I wanted to give you an overview of our accountability and MCAS performance overall. And as a reminder, because I know for families at home, MCAS is a common term and people are seeing it regularly, but districts receive accountability ratings, and I wanted to remind folks that MCAS is a part of that accountability rating. So it involves the MCAS achievement levels, how the growth levels of our students, how they do each year as far as their student growth percentiles, the rate of high school completion, our progress as a district towards attaining English language proficiency, and chronic absenteeism, which is something that we've been talking quite a bit about. That's part of the accountability rating as well, and advanced coursework completion at the high school level. So those are all factors that are part of what determines our overall accountability level. So we receive quite a few reports and quite a bit of data. So I tried to pick out some key pieces to share with you this evening that really highlight, where we're headed as a district. So the district's overall classification is not requiring assistance or intervention, and that's always a great place to be. As a district, we made substantial progress towards targets, and our criterion reference target percentage was 51% last year and 64% in 2024, so 23 and 24. So that was an increase of 13%, which is always trending in the right direction. The chart at the bottom I outlined in pink to give you a little more context. In 23, again, it was 51, 24 was 64, but each of those, in order to determine the overall percentage for this year, it's weighted. So the score from the prior year is 40%, and the score from that year is 60%, giving us the 59% overall, which puts us in the substantial progress towards target category. So we also have school accountability percentiles, which indicates how well a school is performing overall compared with other schools, similar schools with the same grade levels. An accountability percentile between 1 and 99 is reported for most schools. This number is an indication of the school's overall performance relative to other schools that administer similar assessments, and is calculated using up to 2 years of data for all accountability indicators, like we talked about with the 40% and 60%. Accountability percentiles are not calculated for districts as a whole, just for individual schools. Or they're also not calculated for schools that don't give MCAS or don't have more than one grade level. So for example, Shawsheen and Woburn Street only have third grade, so there's not more than one grade level to have a growth measure, those students, because they move. Someday down the road, if we have on the north side a K-5 building, we'll have that data for those students because they would be in the same building multiple years. You can see down the bottom, we had, well, first I should indicate that you'll notice that Wildwood isn't even listed as a school according to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We are no longer, they are students at West and at the middle school. We have kindergarten listed there, so that's why it's not on this particular list. However, we don't get data for Boutwell and Wildwood because of them being early childhood centers. But you can see that all of our schools are not requiring assistance or intervention. You can see in the pink is the growth that we saw in each of those schools in the overall accountability percentiles. So that was, every school was trending in the right direction there as well. This next chart talks about the overall progress towards improvement targets by school, and each school and subgroup of students, we are provided with improvement targets at the so for example, once we had the 23 school year data was finalized, they provide the district with targets that we are aiming for the next school year. So these targets are fall into 4 different categories: meeting or exceeding targets, substantial progress towards targets, moderate progress towards targets, or limited or no progress towards targets. So you can see how each school increased and what their rating is overall based on that. This chart gets into the MCAS data specifically. And just to highlight, these tables really show the change in the percent of students who earned a meeting or exceeding rating from 2023 to 2024. So the first column is the state's overall performance from 23 to 24 and what change there was in the percent of students meeting or exceeding. And the second column is Wilmington Public Schools at each of these grade levels. So the first table in yellow is English Language Arts. You can see overall the state showed a decline from 23 to 24 at all grade levels. And we are, in Wilmington, we had a decline at some grade levels, but we also saw significant growth in grades 4, grade 7, and grade 8. So that was exciting to see, and even 17 points difference for grade 7 was significant, given the fact that across the state there was a 4-point decline. In math, we saw the state was mixed here. We had grades 3 and 4 showed an increase at the state level, and a slight decline, 5, 6, 7 stayed the same at 8, and a decline at 10. Wilmington had a significant increase for grade 3 in math, stayed the same for grade 4, slight decline for grades 5 and 6. But then we saw growth 7, 8, and 9 in math. 7, 8, and 10. And then for science, the state improved slightly at grade 5, declined at grade 8, and improved slightly at grade 10. We saw higher improvement rates across all of the grade levels in 5, 8, and 10 from Wilmington 23 to 24. So positive trends, even though at the state level we did see variations, but it's nice to see overall positive trends for Wilmington. This next slide talks about the student subgroups. So this is ELA. This is looking at student achievement overall. So the top part of the slide is for grades 3 to 8. The bottom is high school. So in this first slide, I'll spend just a minute to orient you to the table. The column on the left is the group of students. Those are the different subgroups that we're looking at. You'll notice that some subgroups don't have any data. So for example, American Indian or Alaskan have 2 students if you look over to the N column number. So you have to have, I believe, 20, I believe, or somewhere around there, right around that area, to have data actually populate as a subgroup. I thought it was 20. Is that not accurate? Do you know? It's interesting because I just noticed that there's a 20, but there's no data there, so maybe it's above 20. Yep. Thank you. So the first column, so you have the group, then you have the 2023 achievement score, scaled score. That's the composite scaled score. And then the 2024 achievement, and then you can see the change in the next column. And as I mentioned before, a target is set for each subgroup, and you can see the target set for each of those groups for 2024. Again, the N is the number of students that were assessed in that column. Now the points are allocated based on the performance and how they did to reach the target. So for example, in that first row, all students, the achievement level was in 23 was 496.6. They increased to 498.3 in 2024, so the change was 1.7. But the target was 499.2, so they didn't reach the target even though they improved. So you can see under the last column on the right, the recovery path is improved but below target. So we were awarded 2 points for that particular group of students because they improved. So there's a point allocation. If you've met the target, it's 3 points. If you've exceeded, it's 4, et cetera. So you can get a sense here, and this is the type of analysis that we'll be doing next week with all of the staff, really looking at, our subgroups and are they looking at all students, but then also making sure that subgroups are showing significant growth as well and are improving at the same rate as all students is what we're aiming for. The bottom you can see, so for the high school, the lowest performing students overall stayed the same, but in all other subgroups declined slightly, but you can see that in the reason column. And again, it's specific to looking at the targets that were set. The math subgroups, grades 3 through 8, you can see that improvements in all subgroups except for our EL and former EL. So looking down at the reason column, we had improved below target, exceeded the target, met target, and on so forth. But the EL and former EL students in this particular group they declined slightly, from not even a full percentage point, but it was a decline. And then at the high school, all students, white and lowest performing, met, improved, or exceeded. Our high needs students, low income, and students with disabilities declined in those subgroups. Science, grades 5 and 8, you can see that our low income and Asian students declined. All others improved or exceeded the target. And at the high school level, high needs students declined, all students and white students improved overall. We're looking at, again, 3 grade levels that are participating in the science MCAS assessment. The last slide I wanted to talk a little bit about is it came up at a public comment earlier around questions around ballot question number 2 and implications that might have for Wilmington if it should pass. So some of the questions that were brought up were, what would that mean for us as a district? So wanted to share some information here. If MCAS is eliminated as a graduation requirement, it is anticipated that the assessment will still be administered, providing the district with student, school, and district level data, so we would still have access to that data. WPS has rigorous graduation requirements in place already, and they're outlined in our student handbook. Those would remain in place. We use external assessments as well, like PSAT, SAT, AP, ACT, and STAMP, and these all help us to get a snapshot, a picture of how students are performing, and they are opportunities for us to assess how well our internal grades really are correlating with external assessments. And at the high school, they've really worked hard over the last year or so to really increase correlation in recent years, and by increasing the rigor of internal WPS assessments. The implication on a district like Wilmington from thinking about a numbers perspective is relatively minimal. Very few students who take the regular MCAS assessment, I'm not referring to the all, but most students pass by their senior year. If there are students that don't pass during their sophomore year, they have the opportunity to take it again as a junior or senior. When I did check with our counseling CTL at the high school, she said she could recall maybe one student that was impacted in the last many, many years. So very different scenario than I'm sure other districts, bigger districts, districts in more of an urban area may be a different scenario. But Wilmington, that's the scenario that we would be facing if that decision were to be made. So just wanted to share that insight. And I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Questions? Mr. Ragsdale.
For students who don't pass MCAS in their sophomore year, what kind of supports are in place to prepare them for retesting and subsequent science opportunities?
Sure, and I might even turn that over to, we do offer, part of our schedule with our flex block is ensuring that we have opportunity for students to get the intervention that they need. But do you want to talk anything about? Yeah, sure. Come join me, Mr. Gendron.
Mr. Gendron, welcome.
Yep, so flex block is huge for intervention, especially with students who haven't succeeded on their first try. Another big effort through the English, math, and science curriculum team leaders is they do a deep dive into the standards and indicators that the student did not do well on and provide those reports to the current teacher, so the teacher who gets the student in 11th grade. So that layer of reinforcement, reteaching, and intervention is embedded in their core instruction as well as in the supplementary flex interventions.
That's it?
Just for the moment.
I'm sorry, I'm just surprised.
Yeah.
You don't have to say, you'll be up later.
Thank you.
I have,
Keep going if you have more, yeah.
um,
The floor is yours.
I don't know if I need the floor exactly. Just a few comments from kind of looking over the numbers myself. One of the things that I think is worth noting is that given where our average scaled scores are, the percentage meeting and exceeding can be a little bit, I think, misleading, because they can change a lot with very small shifts in the average scale scores. Essentially, so the meeting standard is at 500. So that's the threshold for hitting meeting expectations. And most of our average scaled scores are right around that 500. A little underneath, 498, a little over 501. So, you go down from 500 to 499, and now you've gone from meeting and exceeding to now you're in the partially meeting category. But you've actually only decreased by one scaled score point, which is not even in itself meaningful. It's not even in the standard error of measurement. So it's just something to bear in mind, because even, for example, if you look at our grade 5, so that was a place where our meeting and exceeding percentage went down for both ELA and math. It was down 6 percentage points for ELA and 4 percentage points for math. But it was actually only down 1 point for average scaled scores, so 499 to 498 in ELA, and it actually didn't decrease at all for math. So it was 505 last year, and then this year the average scaled score again is 505. Now the distribution of how that averaged out was a little bit different. So it means that we had more students who were a little under that 500 and some other students who were above but higher above. So when it all worked out into the average, we had some students who scored even higher, and so everything washed out to the same 505, even though the percentage was a little bit different. But I think that that's something that's worth noting, that what I think we're really looking at, and the scaled scores really show this, is honestly just kind of like a fairly flat situation over the last couple of years. Looking back to 2022, there's just not a lot of movement in most of these grades. A couple points here and there, depends a little bit on the grade and the subject. But we're probably about 5 scaled score points below where we were in 2019 pre-pandemic. So Wilmington, like most of the state, is not where we were. And also, not quite recovering, I guess, in the way that we sort of hoped that we would. But that, again, just seems to be, I don't think because of anything we're doing specifically, that seems to be the reality, not just in Massachusetts, but across the state, that kind of getting back up to where we were, pre-2020 has just proved really difficult. But that, essentially we're kind of on a very similar path over the last 3 years at least.
I would say, just to provide some information for you, obviously, this is a high-level overview for this committee. Each building, each principal will be doing a presentation to their full staff with much more specific data that they will be looking at and sharing out, looking at each grade level. And this year, at many levels, the teachers will be getting individuals, class data, as well as looking at it as a team. We have an analysis process where they kind of look together, look at the curricular trends, look at how did kids do overall, and then looking at reflecting on their own practice and how their students did last year, as well as how did the students who are currently in seat with them now, how did they perform last year. So that level, and that last year we really looked more at the district-wide or the grade level scores and performance, and this year we're really trying to hone in more specifically. Like Ryan mentioned, the CTLs at the secondary level were able to really pull individual data for teachers, for students who may not have done well or did not pass, and really provided that last year, but we're hoping to expand that analysis even further. I do think that we have made in our analysis that we're looking at, we're looking at it at more of a granular level, if you will, and, we're looking at the 2019 through the 2024 to look at those trends, and we're looking to see that growth. And you're right, in many places, it is pretty level, but we are starting to see some of that changing, and in different grade levels in different subject areas starting to grow more consistently. So, we're confident that the work that we've done as a district around literacy, especially with the adoption of our new literacy program that we're using this year, we're already seeing significant growth, and preliminary data of the students who were in the pilot last year for those programs. We saw, informal, it wasn't a full year, but we saw growth for those students as well. So that's promising that will help steer us in the right direction. And we're seeing growth in some of the, the groups, particularly at the middle school, with the interventions that we're providing, we are seeing improvement there. So, so that's, maybe not complete trend everywhere, but we're seeing that growth, and that's promising. So I do feel like we are, you're absolutely right, Mr. Ragsdale, it's a slow path, but I feel like we're on the right path and we're moving forward. So, and then, with the addition of the MTSS at the high school really being more formalized recently this year, with the change to the schedule and the flex block and the interventions, we have all the pieces in place to be able to really do this work and to continue to support the teaching and learning that's happening every day.
Other questions?
I'll let other people talk.
You let me go? I'm happy to have you go, but I'm going to just say one quick thing. I was going to ask exactly that, about what are we doing at the building level to look at these scores? Are we looking at release test questions? Are we trying to see trends?
There weren't any 3 to 8 this year.
Right, so,
So it's really hard to analyze how we did on those questions.
David, that's a little tricky if we
Yeah.
can't see what, I'm kidding, but
Can't you fix that?
have any sway. But I do think that what we do with that, right, is so important at that level, as opposed to families getting it and trying to figure out what that means, right? What we really should be using it for is, are there gaps at 5th grade in this particular area? We see geometry as an issue. What are we doing about that? So I hope that it's being used in that way, and it sounds like it is, in addition to all the other sort of progress monitoring we're doing. So I feel like everything that we've done with literacy in particular, and now kind of having this additional data, and the rollout of MTSS sort of district-wide, I feel like we're right on that cusp of kind of seeing
Yeah.
a big year, hopefully. But
And it's interesting too, because conversations that we're having at data meetings, and then the MCAS results come out and we're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we were seeing. We were questioning, and, at a middle school data meeting, looking at geometry scores, for example, can you go back and look at the pacing at the 5th grade? We want to know where that was, or it wasn't, forget what it was in geometry, but whatever area it was, asking us to kind of, we're connecting the the math STEM coordinator at the elementary, let's talk about the pacing that's happening there to make sure it's connected and what our students doing. And we're still doing the math, saying, okay, these students were in this grade during our hybrid year, and we know they had limited, opportunity for practice and explicit instruction. And so we're still doing the math when we calculate, what they may have missed and trying to still backfill. But when we're doing that at the middle school and high school level, we're starting to see more of less of that at the elementary level, obviously. But yes, we're definitely, the dots are all connecting.
I also wanted to note that, having kind of made the general point about levelness, that there were some places where those changes absolutely corresponded with substantial changes in scaled scores as well, particularly in some of the areas where we had the most concern previously. So grade 7 ELA, the last 2 years, has been a big concern. In 22, only 36% were meeting and exceeding, and then it went down to 30% last year. So that popped up. That was a 16-point increase to 46%, and that was, in terms of average scaled scores, that was a 9-point increase in average scaled score. That was like a real substantive. That's not just people like moving just barely over the margin, of getting into hitting 500. That's a substantial a substantial increase. And what's also, I think, heartening is that not only did because that's just looking at it at the 7th grade, but they're different students. When you look at it as when you follow that cohort to 8th grade, they improved in 8th grade. So last year, those students, the 7th graders, had only 30% meeting and exceeding in ELA, and then as 8th graders, now they have 50%. So that's also, I mean, that's a huge jump from the 7th grade year to the 8th grade year. So there's also a lot of nice improvement to see there. One last thing that I want to mention is that at the state level, they're making a real big deal about chronic absenteeism, just as a general matter, but then also connected to the MCAS results, because they have a lot of pretty robust data showing incredibly strong correlations between school attendance and basically MCAS results, and that chronic attendance, or rather chronic absence, is extremely highly correlated with far, far worse MCAS performance and other school performance. But I think too much is made of this as a causal connection. And so I'm not saying we're doing that, but I always distrust monocausal explanations for things. And I think that you're going to find that when you unpack all the different reasons that people are absent from school, that there's a lot of different things going on, and that many of those underlying causes have huge effects on performance. And it's not just whether the kids were, in school this many days or that many days.
Others? Mr. Turner?
Two quick things. Thank you very much for the data. I do want to, somewhat reiteration, but specifically, we've talked a lot about the middle school over the last couple of years, and it is very good to see this sort of result and the type of improvement you've been talking about here. I do find it a little bit frustrating. In some of the other slices of data we do have as some of the segments of groups, gender, and I always want to at least have an eye towards, are there specific places where by gender we're either struggling and we need to focus more attention on how we engage with the students, or where we've got things that are going well that we want to highlight. And so I know this particular slice doesn't have that, and that's a little bit frustrating. I know we have it in other places, and so I'm not super concerned, but it was a little disappointing that wasn't part of the way they sliced it for this presentation, or for this analysis. Because it is always something that I feel it's really important to make sure that we aren't losing sight of.
Yeah, so.
The prior data case we had where the results were clearly different in certain grades, math versus ELA by gender, and that's problematic.
So these were directly from the school and district profiles, which don't sort that, but we do have as you mentioned, we do have access to that data we use Open Architects, so we have it's pretty intuitive and high level where we can really filter things in multiple ways. We can look at gender by specific other subgroups, students on IEPs by gender and how they perform. So we have the ability to do that at the at the school level. The school administrators can all pull that data. So that's definitely work that we continue to do and look at. So beyond just these subgroups.
I'm just going to add, thank you for all this information. I'm just going to add what I add every year when we sort of discuss this is, MCAS is one piece, one slice of time, for, it sometimes is 2 days out of life, but it's good to hear that you're seeing these connections between our own sort of internal and external assessments. And that's one of the things that I think is going to be really crucial, is that it's one data point, but if we can make sure that it's connected to all these other things, then I think that's going to give us the best picture of how we're progressing as a district, as opposed to just MCAS. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Christine.
Hopefully, thank you, Ms. Elliott, and for your continued leadership around this. You've received the picture, hopefully, many a times around the insertion of data as part of a practice, data analysis as part of the practice throughout our district, and that's certainly a testament to our school leaders under the leadership of Ms. Elliott. Hopefully the headline from this, we've made substantial progress towards targets, and I think that that should be the headline, that while everything's not necessarily perfect and we've seen some dips, we've also seen some increases, as has been pointed out. But overall, as a school district, we are making substantial progress towards targets. Where we're trending and struggling is something that unfortunately is being seen, as Mr. Ragsdale pointed out, throughout the state as well too. But most importantly, from a foundational standpoint, we're using this. We're not. I don't believe at all across any of our schools or grades using this to teach to the test. We're using this data as but one piece of data, alongside of many others, to try and inform practice and make informed decisions. So that, I hope, is the headline. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Elliott, appreciate it. All right, the next item on our agenda is the enrollment update as of October 1st, 2024 with Mr. Ruggiero. Dr. Brandon, you gonna say anything, or are we gonna go right to Paul?
Yeah, we can, this is just real quick, this is customary, as you know, it's around this time in which we provide you as a committee and the community with an update. These are, as Paul will share with you, these sort of the unofficial numbers. They're not certified by the state, but they are our enrollment and reflective of what we have in our seats right now throughout our school district. Then I'll talk about the second item with regards to the high school.
Good.
Thank you. In your packet, as Dr. Brand said, there's a snapshot of enrollment as of October 1st of '24, or essentially FY '25. These are not final numbers. They have not been certified by DESE. That'll come later in probably November. But at a high level, pre-K to grade 5 has an increase of about 8 students from FY '24 to FY '25. The middle school, there's a reduction of 18 students. Now, again, it has to do with retention and how, the size of the class in the previous year. So just informationally, the middle school actually had a retention rate of 101% of 5th graders going to 6th grade. 100% and 98% for their 3 grades. So there was a small 5th grade class that moved into the 6th grade this year. High school was up 13 students. The retention rate, 8th to 9th grade, is 72% right now, which is an improvement. Over last year was 71%, and some other years we were as low as 52%. So it seems to be coming back, which is good news. We had out-of-district placements, 3 additional students. So in total, we're up right now non-certified, but it looks like we're up about 6 students, 3 out-of-district and 3 pre-K to grade 12 students. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you, Paul. Questions? Mr. Gold?
Just so for the folks, this is my first time seeing this data presented in one place, and we have it, thanks to Mr. Ruggiero, in a 2014 to 2024 window. And I don't know if the folks at home can see it, but it's a decent long-term drop-off. But just a quick Google, if you map it onto the price of housing in Massachusetts, as the price of housing has accelerated, so too has student population shifted. And I think it's hard not to make that comparison. So the district, I think, has done really well in responding to the pandemic and improving over that decade. But to some degree, this is just like a secular process, a trend that's happening outside of our control. Not entirely, because it's housing, but it's a different can of worms.
Thank you. Mr. Chernow?
So 2 things. One, I do want to follow on that point in a slightly different angle. It is clear that we were trending downward for 3 or 4 years. That trend has effectively stopped. We're flat this year. And if you look forward to the projections for the next few years at even still, it would currently be in the range of the 3-year average is 68% for the high school. If we get towards 72 as an ongoing trend, it would be even higher. So I think it's pretty clear that we've reached the bottom of where that was going after the pandemic, and we are now recovering. And I think that's a really important point to raise. I do also want to note that one of the things that we've seen consistently for several years is the well above 100% for 10th grade. So 10th grade is a year where we have students consistently returning to the district. And I think that's a very important thing and reflects very well on the high school. and what people realize they're going to get when they come back who have chosen to leave. And so I know there's another point where this will come up in a few minutes here, but on this, just the raw data, that's been consistent, and I think it's a really strong reflection on the high school as well. So thank you as always for the data, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Tara. Other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Paul. So I think that segues us into the Wilmington High School schedule update with Mr. Gendron. Dr. Brand, do you want to tee this up?
Yes, as he comes forward. So this is really related to enrollment specifically. It's not at all meant to be a snapshot of sort of what the overall implications have been of the new schedule. As you know, Mr. Gendron presented last winter and spring the new schedule that's in place here. I know he'll touch a little bit upon this, but really aligned with overall enrollment, thought it would be appropriate to give you a sense of what that's looking like here at the high school early on in the year. So welcome, Mr. Gendron. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Shubangi, hello. I think it's important to talk about both because kind of both things are happening at the same time. We're seeing a higher rate of students retained and transferring back to the high school at the same time that we made scheduling changes that were intended to maximize efficiency and impact class sizes. So in the memo in the packet, there was just a brief review of the process that Wilmington High School underwent to arrive at a new schedule. This process began in 2021 during the MCAS visit, where they recommended that WHS, quote, ensure the current schedule is working for all students and staff. And over the course of those 3 years, a working group of educators with feedback from students and families determined that there were gaps where the schedule was not working for some, and they devised the current schedule. Some features: it added an elective block, it created a daily flex block, it shortened the overall block lengths, created staff common planning time, and addressed student access inequities. And while the early feedback is really strong anecdotally, we're going to wait until the completion of semester 1 to systematically survey and gather formal feedback. But want to talk about the numbers. And so the purpose of this update is to share information about the impact of both the schedule change and the increased enrollment numbers. While we have successfully scheduled students and we still have space for more transfers to come back, the combination of both of these things happening at the same time has resulted in a tighter master schedule than previously forecasted. And I appreciate the comments or the questions of this committee last year about are there any potential concerns, and that tightness was one. And I think when you look at the enrollment numbers, you'll appreciate where that unanticipated demand came from. So the first figure in the chart is the enrollment patterns. I tried to go a little bit more in detail showing the projected growth as of 2022-23. That was when the 3-year average was the lowest, averaging at 58.6% of 8th graders coming to the high school as 9th graders. At that time, it projected for the high school enrollment to be in the 540s currently, and it's currently at 625. And so that gap of 77 students is not insignificant, especially in proportion to our total enrollment. And that creates stress on the current staffing. At the time, with a projected enrollment of only 544, there were staff-related reductions. And so as we look at even next year's anticipated enrollment, which could be as high as 103 over those early projections, I think it's important just to go back to the grade-by-grade analysis and share those outcomes with you. At the bottom of that figure, we have the net transfer numbers. So that shows how many students are transferring in, how many students are transferring out, and how many students have dropped, dating back to 2021. And so you see in 2020, the 2020-2021 school year, the difference was actually negative. Students were leaving by way of transfer or drop. But certainly in the past couple of years, that net has been quite positive. Last year, we were plus 29, and in the first 2 months of school, we're plus 23. Those numbers are also captured in the current percentages above, but I wanted to tease it apart to show kind of that experience. Just a note on last year's transfer in. You see that number was 53 transfer in. 20 of those 53 came from Shawshene Valley Tech, which I know is a number of interest. On the next page, there is the class size report. So that's showing for each department and aggregated by the course level size with a separate column for elective classes. So those would be the non-core classes, showing this year how the course level averages broke down. We spent some time talking about whether the class like median sizes would be more appropriate or the average sizes, but I think, average class sizes are typically used. You see in some cases, they're pushing towards 20. There are instances of sections full at 20 and some above 20. And you see, especially in some elective classes, averaging at 19 or 19 point something. That's indicating that those electives are pretty much full, maybe with one seat left across multiple sections. And the last thing I would like to point out as we talk about class sizes and scheduling is at some of the other grade levels, students spend their whole day with their class. And so scheduling 20 students to a class, those 20 students are with that teacher for the day. Whereas at the high school, for each class a student has, it's with a different teacher in a different department. And it's really a complex game of kind of matchmaking student availability and where the courses live. And so when we have courses that run only once, like one section, those become really difficult to schedule because they're like anchors in the student schedule, and we have to build the rest around them. So there are times where you'll see some averages that are quite low, especially with AP classes. In most cases, those are courses that run one section, and that's the total number of students who signed up for them, not like an intentional decision to allocate staff in a way that drive those lower than they should be. And so I think that's it. Just wanted to kind of bring together the conversation about enrollment with the changes to the schedule. Again, want to emphasize that I think in large part due to the preparation and thoughtfulness that went into the schedule change, it's really been a smooth transition, which is not a common experience for new schedule implementation. So I commend all the people who contributed to that and worked on that. And for the people who are continuing to schedule class changes and transfer in schedules, a lot of creativity, a lot of flexibility, and we're still getting student schedules that they enjoy. And so I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify as would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Gendron. Appreciate it. Questions? Mr. Axel.
So I'm curious how the transition from the longer W-2 period every other day to the daily flex block has gone. And do you feel that that's been overall, a benefit? Have there been challenges to having a smaller amount of time to work with, even though it's every day?
Yep, and we actually talked about this at the School Advisory Council yesterday, so I have some fresh feedback for you. But the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, that the daily aspect of it creates a routine element to it, that students know every day they can see a teacher that they need to see. They don't have to wait potentially to the next day and then sign up for a really long period of time, that they're getting more done in shorter periods of time for the most part. One area of challenge that I think we talked about last year is in the area of reassessments. So if a teacher has 75 minutes for a class and potentially an assessment, but only 48 minutes for a flex block, they got to make some decisions about how they're going to administer that. I'd say most teachers are landing on splitting up the assessment, either some prompts on one day and some prompts on the other, or if there's a DBQ and different types of questions, they'll separate those. So they're problem solving that effectively, I think. But I would say that the convenience of being able to complete a whole assessment in one flex block is something that has shifted. But overall, the feedback from the School Advisory Council, I think my anecdotal conversations with student and parents and staff have been fairly positive.
Other questions? Mr. Turner.
So some of the exact same things I already said, so I won't repeat myself, which is always a good thing for everyone else around here. I will say anecdotally, the new schedule is a hit with at least some freshmen and seniors. Seniors who can appreciate the change and freshmen who can appreciate the additional opportunities. So that's certainly very good to see. The piece I would be curious about, and it kind of goes to some of what Mr. Ragsdale brought up earlier, on the transfers out and the drop side of things to the causal and is one thing a cause the other, is one thing, or is it the inverse relationship? Is there evidence on attendance that leads into transfer out and or drop, where if we can understand the attendance issues, we can then have a positive impact on reductions of transfers out and or drops. So, I mean, it's very good when you think of percentage-wise that only 2 children have dropped. That's still two children who've dropped, and there's probably a pretty important story in each of those cases. And so, is there causal things we can look at in those cases to understand? And I could never imagine a situation where we zero in any one of these different directions for sustainable, but to understand the whys to try and address some of those could be an opportunity as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the promising elements of that number being so small is it's manageable to case study those, and you really get into the factors. Almost all of them begin with chronic absenteeism, so I think that makes sense why the state is calling so much attention to that. But certainly there are many other factors. But I know the school social workers and school counselors involved with those cases could elaborate, and it's a good idea to go back chronologically through them to look for the patterns.
Other questions? You guys are quiet tonight. I have one, if it's okay. We talked a little bit about challenges before, and I know at the last meeting when you were here, when we were talking about the schedule, we talked about challenges, but I'm looking at this chart, excuse me. This school year, you're plus 77 students over projection, and you're anticipating plus 103 for the next school year, which I think is maybe poor phrasing, but a great problem to have, right? Increased enrollment is something that I think we're all interested in and working towards. But the beginning of the memo talks about necessitating staff reductions in earlier years. At what point, as we, you know, the budget subcommittee met earlier, and I know Paul is always thinking about the next budget cycle, right? At what point does that increase over anticipated students necessitate a conversation over, do we have enough staff? Like, what's the breaking point? Or the point where you need to increase or talk about increasing staff?
I think schools typically use the number 100 as like an indicator of that. Teachers at the high school teach 5 sections, and so 5 sections of 20 students would be 100 seats, 100 landing spots. So I've seen that number used in different districts as an indicator number. When we looked at the number of sections that are above 20, which is the contractual target, we found that there's about 50 in the 50s for the number of students we're over and couldn't fit without telling the students, sorry, I know you want to take that class, but take this instead. And that was like a spot we weren't comfortable being. And I think fortunately, you know, our educators supported that mission too and took an extra student in certain cases. But where that number is 50 currently and the projection is at 100, I think that's probably one of the next steps that should probably be discussed. Other schools go different routes when they hit kind of the top of their schedule, and I don't think we're at the tippy top of our schedule yet, but some schools look at having students unscheduled for certain blocks, but that certainly has cons. Perhaps they might argue pros, but cons. Some schools look at being firmer with not really dedicating to awarding students their primary elective choice and saying that you can settle for your alternate. But again, that's not really in line with our philosophy of why we pursued this schedule. So I think right now, thanks to, you know, Mr. Miranda, who spends all summer really twisting and wrenching this schedule to get kids what they want. Thanks to the counselors who don't leave any leaf unturned to find seats for what that student wants to take. We'll continue to go that route, but certainly, you know, in that plus 77 to 100 is, I think, appropriate for a conversation about an additional teacher.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Turner.
I forgot one thing. So, in terms of the 8-class schedule, your experience and what you've heard anecdotally from other students, do you feel like it's been a positive change this year for the high school?
So anecdotally, from my friends, I've heard that they really like the flex block, and they have lots of more choices in their schedules. Personally, I can't say it because I'm a dual enrollment student,
Okay.
so I don't go at the high school, but I've heard positive feedback from my friends, especially with the new flex block, because more students are taking APs, or like I have more friends who are taking APs, so it's definitely more helpful to go during flex block and get that like one-on-one with the teacher. So yeah, and then also with the eight class schedule, it just gives students so many more choices to take class and like explore more classes and more career areas.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gendron.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
all.
coming as always.
Sorry.
No, that was
Thank you.
really appreciate that.
Okay, moving along, thank you for your patience. The Wilmington Middle School's ADL No Place for Hate program presentation. Come on down, guys. Join us.
As these folks come down, we thought it would be just a great opportunity to be able to share with the committee and the community something that we're collectively excited about in terms of the launch of the No Place for Hate program at the middle school this year, of which there's a brief presentation that's in the packet for those that might be watching at home. As I think many will recall, unfortunately, we had at the middle school last year some challenges with some activity, some student activity and behavior that we certainly collectively recognized and recognized was problematic for the values of our communities here in Wilmington and the middle school in terms of a school community that is inclusive and supportive of all students. And so it was a reflection upon that that we're really ultimately here tonight to share what we think is some pretty exciting and important news to share with this program. And so obviously Mr. Kyrie here, Mr. Faircloth, as well as Ms. Dunham, who's working very closely in partnership with them. So thanks for being here.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you
for
all.
having us. As Dr. Rand just said, we had, some difficulties in the middle school, so instead of sitting back and not doing anything, we embraced with the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, had some nice conversations with them. They kind of leaped us into this idea. So we're running a program. We're not the only school in the state to do this. It's No Place for Hate. This is an embedded program that we are going to be selecting some students, all right, and then we're going to have some dedicated staff that are going to help guide, all right. We're looking to make sure this is a safe, inclusive, and thank you for doing that, by the way, respectful environment. The young lady from No Place for Hate, his name is Sarisa Volan. She's been an absolute wealth of information. They put me through a little mini curriculum to learn, what the anticipation of what other schools are doing. I will be honest with you, it's been a little difficult for me because I'm used to guiding and I'm used to kind of putting ideas out there and everything, but this is all about me and the team guiding students, and the students will be the main leaders of this group. So I'll explain in a minute a little bit how that will happen. But I do want to really press the importance that this is something that's going to be sustainable in the middle school. All right, it's a change of culture. We have a great new principal that's helping us change the culture. We're working on a major culture shift in our building, and we want this to make sure that it's positive change that's sustainable. And sustainable is a really important part of this for us. I mentioned what Dr. Brand has right here, but I am hoping we can all imagine a middle school that's more inclusive, right? It represents an inclusive community. That's what we're trying to change. We obviously had some of the difficulties, as Dr. Brand had mentioned last year, and I'm really proud of our school for not ignoring it. I'm really proud of the community for jumping on board and the ADL being involved with this, because we're taking it serious and we are going to make a difference. It goes to the common mission of anti-bullying, all forms of hate, and fostering a culture of inclusion. That's going to be very, very important, all right? And we want our students to be upstanders. Thank you. So how do we do this? All right, this is the part that, as I mentioned before, is tricky for me. I want to just kind of put it out there and say we're going to do X, right? But that's not how No Place for Hate works. Much like some other programs that are run, if you really want to see a culture change, you got to do it through your students, right? The students are going to be the ones that move this. So we're going to kind of step back. We're going to guide them. We're going to give them the information and resources that the ADL is going to support us with, but they're going to guide the direction of where we're going to be going with this. Fortunately, I put out a survey early in the year. I know Nick likes the surveys, to get some interest. And much to my surprise, the idea with No Place for Hate is you're supposed to have about 3 or 4 teachers guiding about 20 students, okay? The interest I had went right to 15 teachers right off the bat. So that's a real positive thing. So I actually had to filter it down. We came down to a very, very nice select group. We, to be completely honest, we chose 6, which is higher than what they recommend, but there's a lot of people that have a lot of things in life, young parents and everything. So we agreed as a group it would be nice to have 6 people because of different situations. If they couldn't be there, we'd always have 5. So I'd like to thank Kate Lerner, Jacqueline Madden, Amy Lightfoot Taylor, Carolyn Curtis, Shannon Keeley, and myself. We will be the ones that will be guiding our students on this journey this year. We're expected to have a minimum of 4 meetings or up to 8. That's the ADL's general guidelines, so we'll be following that. So going back to what I kind of mentioned before, we, as a teacher group, we kind of had to make a decision. We knew that we're looking for 20 to 25 students. We're going to try to keep it on the lower end of 20. We had a lot of conversations surrounding how do we make that mix, what's that mix look like. Originally, we kind of said we'll load it all up on 8th graders and maybe a few 7th graders, but then we through conversation realized, I said sustainable earlier, right? So we want this to be sustainable. So we're going to have our 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders. And lo and behold, we put out some feelers through announcements and everything for kids to submit why they wanted to be part of this, all right? So we wanted the people looking to be part of this to have, we had some select questions to see that they had some values behind it and supported it. So we're working on, we just actually met this afternoon, we've got it down to about 15 to 20 students. We will have a Google Classroom page, and they're gonna find out pretty soon, so don't, stay tuned. But, so we're just trying to have a balance. We're gonna taper it. We're gonna try to have mostly 8th graders, a few 7th, and a few 6th graders. It's kinda neat to see, the interest in our 6th graders was tremendous. So that was really kinda cool. I don't know if that's a societal thing, but they're coming up ready to help be part of our school, which has been really exciting. For people that don't know how this works, it's student-driven. And so we're just going to be the adults using the resources of the ADL, but the students are going to have conversations. They're going to look at how they're going to change the culture in the school. So, and let's go to the next one there. So the big thing with this call to action, so to speak, is that there has to be 3, the ADL requires 3 major school-wide activities. So it's easy for me to sit here and have a lot of great ideas, but these won't be my ideas. These are going to be the students' ideas. So we're going to have a group of good adults. They're going to foster these kids to create ideas. We'll work with Mr. Kyra here to do school-wide ones. I have talked to other communities and seen different things that they have done. So I have some ideas in the back of my mind, but I have to keep my mind open that the kids are going to choose these ideas. We've already embedded ADL lessons in our advisory groups, which has been tremendous. Mr. Kyra, Mr. Kneibel, and I were doing a walkthrough the other day, and we got to actually to see them live, which was really cool because 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are very, very different. And we could hear the different interpretations of the videos they watched. And it was really kind of neat because and I think we both were pretty impressed by the 6th graders that were really invested in this. So the whole idea is we're going to change the school community to be more accepting, right? That's the idea, more accepting community. I'm going to read you the pledge. So just so you know, obviously, at one point or another, the students are going to embrace this, and we'll have to do something school-wide, but I thought it'd be important. Some of you can see it up there, but I'm going to read them to you. I will seek to understand and respect those who are different than me. I will address challenging prejudice, bias, and discrimination. I will act as an ally to support those who are targets of bias, bullying, and hate. I will help students in my school feel included, respected, and treated fairly. I will help make our school a no place for hate. So I'm really looking forward to this venture, and it's nice that you gave us the opportunity to present this to you guys. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Golden?
So I want to say thank you for doing all this work. When I joined the school committee just a couple months ago, and I was thinking, what are the things that would be a priority for me? Because there wasn't like a long campaign or election that would involve talking about issues. This was probably the number one or one of the top three, because specifically anti-Semitism, but all kinds of hate have been kind of on the rise in recent years. And if you look at data from students and cohorts of students, there's a lack of understanding, not just specifically, I think, of the Holocaust and that historical knowledge, but also kind of how discrimination leads to hate, and hate leads to like layered systems of like apartheid or crimes against humanity, right? So this is so critical, and I love that it's driven by the kids. Yeah. I think that's really, really great. So yeah, I commend you, and I'm really proud to be a member of the school committee in a community where we're doing this. Thank you.
It's exciting.
Thank you. Mr. Samaha, and then Mr. Turner.
I just echo what Mr. Golden said. I appreciate you guys taking this on. It's great to hear how much support you're getting from staff and students. That's really important. One of my questions, and I guess, is thinking about sort of like the edges of this, like the before and after middle school. Like, is there a place for this to have some transfer in the high school? And is there some work that can be done in maybe the 4th and 5th grade before coming to the middle school? I don't know if you have the answers to that, but I'm just curious.
I don't have the answers, but the interesting part is that came up in conversation literally today. And people that know me know that one of my big things for this district is vertical alignment, and I love Ryan's not here. I love working with John and Mark and those guys, and every time we come up for different meetings, we have conversations, and we always have these little things about aligning this and aligning that. I just was talking to Dan Miller today about program names and stuff like that. So I think what you're talking about is crucial. I think it makes a lot of sense for us, because of the situations we have from last year, to break the ground on this, right? And I will say, it's a different thinking process. This organization is about letting the kids guide it, which is kind of a really cool idea, but it's not what teachers naturally like to do. Teachers like to design things, implement them, and do them, right? And let's be honest. So this is so it's hard to kind of sit back and, like, I know that what's we're going to do is going to be great coming down the line, but I don't know what it's going to be, which is hard as an educator to do. But I do agree 100%, Jay, that the alignment's going to be crucial. But let us break the ground, and then I can start talking to Ryan, and and you're right. Maybe it's something we can start to edge out. I know
in the conversations that I have been a part of with the ADL, I could speak pretty confidently that they're going to be willing to help out other levels of the district, right, with some of these resources. I think the unfortunate part of this for me is the reason why we started this. I wish this was a more proactive approach, right? I wish we kind of did something like this without kind of being almost forced into it. Like, we need to do this, is something we needed to do, and I'm glad we're doing it. And Dan has done a tremendous job alongside Erin, really taking the lead. But I would imagine that moving forward, the ADL will be very willing to help us kind of grow this to the high school and then to the elementary. I think middle school is a perfect age to start something like this. That's where we've seen some issues in the past, right? And I think it's just it's a fun age group.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, first of all, thank you very much. This is critically important.
Yeah.
It is something to be addressed head on, and partnering with the ADL is a fantastic way to do this. And the benefits across all the ways that we talk about people and divide people across race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, that pledge is perfect to talk to all of those different dimensions. And the fact of the matter is the pledge says middle school, high school. So to Mr. Samaha's point, as these 8th graders move on to high school, there's a natural transition, and to keep it going forward, I do think part of the interesting thing about middle school is it's such a fundamental change in educational experience from 5th grade, that if we can get some of this built into their learning earlier, where they're changing everything else about school, having it already built in coming in the future would be a natural way, so that this isn't something they're learning new at middle school when they're learning their new schedule, that all the other pieces about, you know, the time in their body of the middle school years, as well as the changing of all the educational things, to have it flow in that way, I think would be great. Certainly, starting where we are makes a lot of sense, and then to layer out from there would be great. And I really look forward to hearing what the student ideas are, those 3 school-wide activities, and how the kids do and how they engage, and then also what we learn from it. Because my understanding is part of last year's 8th grade experience was a unit on the Holocaust. And part of what came out of that unit on the Holocaust was a negative reaction from perhaps a very small number, but certain students. And so if you have this program, are there going to be students who, in the nature of kids rebel? And so how do we view the good, the bad, and the ugly that might come out of this sort of a very positive program? Can be lessons for the next years, and how the students, how you interact with them and how they guide, and their own ideas and their own reactions to it.
I think that's an important point that you bring up, right? I mean, unfortunately for a lot of the kids, their first exposure to some of these things is grade 8. So talking about these subjects at a younger age can only help, in my opinion. And I think the other thing we got to remind ourselves is too, what happened last spring was awful, right? There's no denying that, but it was a few, right? By and large, I would say that our 8th grade class had a lot of positive takeaways from learning about the Holocaust, from the field trip that we took to the Auschwitz exhibit. You know, there was a lot of positive that did come out of last year. Unfortunate that we had to experience what we did to get there, but there were some positive outcomes to it.
And I like what you're saying, because our conversation naturally went, because originally the thought was this was more of an 8th grade issue, right? But as we had conversations as the staff, we started to say, well, we'll build it so it can sustain. We'll get a lot of 7th graders too. Then all of a sudden, someone came up and they were like, well, we really should include the 6th graders, right? And then, much to my surprise, they were right up there, interested and eager. So that vertical alignment, even within our schools, started. So I do think it's going to be a natural progression.
I'm really curious to see how this will align with the current anti-bullying curriculum, the social emotional lessons that we're doing at younger levels, so that we can figure out how we can kind of coordinate and really melt, you know, these initiatives together.
And advisory's become a really good resource in our building for that, you know.
Dr. Bryson.
I guess my question, well, for anybody, but I'm thinking of I'm not sure what your new role, maybe not, but I'm thinking of the family community engagement. What sort of family outreach, or do you anticipate there will be, or how are families informed about this? And I mean, obviously, connecting this to the community and to families is going to be extremely important, and I guess I'm just wondering what this program has in place to do some of that bridging.
That's the hard part for me right now, because I have so many visions of how I would like to see it, but I want the kids to do it. You know, I was talking to someone, Mike Kneibel, about a No Place for Hate video of the kids, they off the top of the building, and they did all these great things that we could share with the community. It would be a fantastic launching point for something like that. But I gotta let it grow organically, right? I can't force the kids down a path, right? But who knows, they might come up with even more creative way, you know? I do anticipate they'll probably be here talking at some point in the year, if we can get invited in, which I think we can. So I think it's gonna happen naturally, but if it needs to be a little guided, we'll guide it.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to follow up on that. And so are parents aware that this,
So
I guess, how is that? So I'm sure parents know.
So there have been conversations,
Yeah.
you know, it was brought up at open house, you know, we talked about how we're gonna be partnering with the ADL, just promoting more inclusive, more welcoming environment. So parents are aware, you know, I can certainly consider, we send out the weekly s'mores newsletters, you know, which I've gotten positive feedback on from the middle schools. We can certainly do a little write-up and make sure that everybody is aware. But those conversations have been had at various
And I'm
school
su-
events throughout the summer and then in the fall.
I'm sure once the team is put together and everything,
Yeah.
we give a lot of positive kudos, so
Yeah.
we'll send that along.
I just had a particular question. So I think, and it actually circles back to our discussion of cell phones earlier. A lot of this is online, obviously, like so much with cyberbullying and everything, but so much of this breeds online. So I'm hoping that if there's a lesson plan that's designed with the staff and when they're working with the kids, that there could be some kind of process to talk to them about, you know, parts of the internet you go to are just cesspools of hatred, right? And like, and so it's kind of an interdisciplinary lesson, right? About cyber security and best practices going online. I just hope that is part of this, because I think that that's where you go and you get down the rabbit hole as a kid, and then you get lost.
Well, I think some of that stuff's already embedded in
Great.
some of the
Right.
anti-bullying lessons that we already teach, right?
Yes.
We're having conversations constantly with students and parents, for that matter, about, you know, watch what kids are doing on social media.
Yep.
You know, look to what they're doing online. You know, so those conversations are being had, and I think that naturally there's gonna be some connection there.
Perfect.
And bringing in the younger ages, when I first thought maybe that was an older thing, but it really isn't. So they'll hopefully by, you know, sixth grade, they're already gonna be starting to talk about it and understanding all that stuff, so I like it.
Mr. Reiser.
So thinking about what we hope to see here, something like this, I don't really think in terms of like metrics. It doesn't seem like the right way exactly to think about it. I mean, obviously, we hope that, you know, the incidence of students drawing swastikas on desks goes to 0. So, you know, I guess there's that metric. But I think that more broadly, it's kind of about, as you were talking about, like that shift in culture and that shift in attitude. From conversations with the ADL, like in schools where this has been implemented successfully, what do they describe as the sort of the change in outcomes or culture that they describe? Like when you look forward to thinking about, like, if this is as successful as we hope it can be, then what does that look like? What does that feel like and sound like?
Sarissa was telling me that a lot of the schools that get involved with this stuff, it gives the students a voice. And I think that's, like you said, it's gonna be a hard metric to measure, but if we've been telling kids for quite a while now, see something, say something, right? And it's working, right? Sometimes it's not the biggest thing, but sometimes it's huge, right? You don't know what it's gonna be. But she says it gives kids a voice. So when the kids start to change the culture, if they know it's okay to speak up about this, and we start getting more information, they say, this kid said this kid said that, I know that that's not right. I think that's gonna be a hard metrics, like you said, but I think that's how we're gonna know. I was working with a student today that I've been working with for 3 years, which has been pretty cool, that instead of the situation staying behind closed doors and them being upset and saying this or go on social media, a student came up to me and said, last time this happened, you sat down with the two of us and we were able to figure this out. Can you do that again? And I said, well, that's not a metric, so to speak, but that told me that for 3 years, she got the message and we were able to sort it out. It was seemed like the simplest thing, but it was a world to her, she said. Because she walked out the door and she didn't think the girl hated her anymore and all that's middle school stuff.
And I would argue that there probably are some metrics that we can look at, right? I mean, we have things like Panorama Survey, you know, we talk about sense of belonging with kids. I mean, something like this, instituting work with the ADL, is directly in line with increasing a student's sense of belonging, right? And feeling connected to the community, maybe having a trusted adult in the school. Like, those are all things that we want to see. So I think some of that stuff potentially could be measured. Are you going to be able to make a direct correlation that it's because of our work with the ADL? Maybe not. But I'd like to see those sense of belonging numbers grow, and I think this will help us get there.
So I'll start by saying thank you. I think this is great, and to your point, you know, unfortunate sort of what led us to this point, but good that we're here, right? I think what I'm hoping you can maybe elaborate a little bit on is, you referenced the word sustainable a couple of times, which I think is great, right? Certainly we want this program to be something that we can continue.
Right.
I think about just like my little example of my kids, right? I have one who's in 8th grade. He's gonna go through this program. Hopefully he takes a lot out of it. He goes off to the high school next year, right? Talk about vertical alignment, that's great.
Yeah.
My younger one's in the 6th grade. So he'll continue through this for the next few years. How does it grow and evolve so that it's, you know, I imagine there's like core lessons that these kids are gonna get every year, but is it just as simple as what the culture of the building is like and what the students think they need dictates this? Like, how does this, aside from just having the program, how does it remain sustainable?
I think it's a great question, because as we were doing the walkthroughs, we were also looking at the lessons were the same lessons for 6th, 7th, and 8th, and we had a conversation about that. So the next time I meet with the ADL, I'm gonna have a conversation, because you're right, if it's the same thing over and over again, that's kind of gonna wash it down, right? So that's something that already came up, and this is what, we haven't even got the kids together. So you're right. So sustainable means to me that it changes a culture. So doing the same lesson over and over again isn't gonna be the way to do it. So it's gonna have to somehow be tiered from grade, advancing as grades to grade. So I'm hoping maybe we get a, group of good teachers like we have and kids, and we look at that and ask those questions, because we can't be the first group to already figure that out, in the first week, because we went through and the 3 of us were like, that's the exact same one for every grade, and then we figured it out. It was mind-boggling that our 6th graders had a deeper conversation on it than some of our 8th graders, but that might just be 8th graders right at the time. But you are right. I don't have a full answer for that. I think we're going to be able to discover it though and make it worthwhile. When I emphasize sustainable, I hate programs that come in and just disappear. Right? We want this to be a culture changing, program that comes in. So when people look at our school and they come from different things, they see that logo right there, and then we're in no place for hate, and it's something that we believe in.
I think the whole thing's part of a bigger conversation, right? I mean, school culture is outlined as, I believe, goal number 3 in the school improvement plan, right? Like, we want to improve the school culture here. This is an important piece of the puzzle. I would argue that if you were to walk into the middle school right now, there is a palpable energy shift in the building. And that's a result of our students, our staff. There's a lot of things that are going into it, but I'm telling you right now, it's a positive culture that we're fostering here. And if you walked in a year or 2 ago, and then come visit.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
come walk in tomorrow. I'll gladly walk anybody at this table around. I think you'll recognize that, I think Jen used to bring up all the time that she wants middle school students to find joy in coming to school. I can tell you that I haven't found as much joy going to the middle school than I have this year in a real long time. And I think that a lot of the staff and students are feeling the exact same way. So we're getting there. This is an important piece of the puzzle, but it's a bigger conversation.
I think the last piece that I would sort of add about sustainability is really thinking about what are the different, so, we have so much social emotional support for our students. How do we find a common thread so that there's an understanding of what's the purpose and function of Panorama? How does it relate to No Place for Hate? Where does anti-bullying come into this? So I think really figuring out how we can connect for the students to have an understanding of why all these things are connected and why it's important as it relates to student culture, I think will be really important.
And this one in particular gives the kids the voice, right? I mean, it really empowers the kids, so they have a better voice than us. Well, social media might be a tough competition, but.
I'll just make one more quick comment about my bridging comment earlier. I think that I love the idea that it's going to be grown by the students and all that. I think this connection to homes is going to be incredibly important for sustainability, and I think that will come from sort of the district and from the school. I mean, although it's happening at the middle school, I'm wondering if is this on our website? Like, do people know we're doing this? Like, is it out there? Are people, I think this is exciting, and I think that at the very least, families can know this.
The pledge.
Pledge.
Yep.
Like, they can know that, they can post that, they can talk about it. I mean, I think the real way to make this kind of change is to bring this out and, you know, get it out of in the middle school, but then spread it out so that it becomes sort of a culture shift beyond those walls. I mean, you can do a ton of great work there, but if this is not also being spoken about at home because families don't know, then it kind of sits there. And it's like, well, when I'm in this place, this is what it sounds like and this is what I do. When I exit this place, the rules change, or it can be, and I think that as a district, for us to really bridge that, and I mean, it's going to be huge and will help for sure to make this sustainable for not just your school, but across the district, that you want kids using these terms. And I think that's a pretty easy way in some ways just to sort of like, people should know this is happening. This is so exciting, right? And I know this is the first step to kind of getting it out there, but I think we can do a really good job sort of amplifying it.
Mr. Turner.
I think actually the key to what the bridging piece you're suggesting is having it on the district website is great, but having it come from the students and not the teachers to the students, then you actually get a case, especially with middle schoolers and high schoolers who are not afraid to tell their parents when the parents are wrong or misinformed, or, you know, they're not shy about those sorts of things, that having them own this will actually have a more positive impact back into the homes than if it was a top-down sort of program. So I think that might be the place where the most benefit outside of the schools will come if being a student-led program, there's a lot of potential there. I think we should do what you're suggesting as well, but in terms of impact.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that good stuff isn't I just want to be clear that I'm not saying that good stuff isn't happening there. I'm saying that we know from research that when this continues and spreads and parents can talk to their children about this, then it becomes really cemented, right? And that's what I mean by the bridging. Not like it's not good there, we got to tell them, but it is good there. Wonderful things are happening in those homes, but we may not all be using the same language. And if parents and families aren't aware, or younger siblings, then it's just a missed opportunity. I don't think it's detrimental necessarily, but I think there are these missed opportunities to have really deep conversations about this sort of stuff in the homes. And this can apply to anything. You could talk about this with literacy. You could talk about this with math. I mean, this is just one particular thing. But I feel like if families understand the anti-bullying stuff we're doing, if they understand and they can have those conversations around the dinner table, that's where I think some of this really starts to shift and change. So I just want, I'm just making sure that people are hearing this going, oh, Jen said this, you know, that's not at all what I mean. I just think that it's so important for us to make sure these things live outside of buildings too.
To just leapfrog off that a little bit, what you're saying, I've worked, years ago I worked on a thing called the White Ribbon Campaign against domestic violence, and it was run by the kids, and one of the things they did was they did this big rally in the downtown, and that, I mean, the whole community was involved at that point, so it wasn't just your parents and teachers, it was everybody that wanted to be a part. You know, I don't know where this will go exactly, you know, it is middle school, but maybe they will do something bigger than we think they're gonna be able to pull off. Maybe it won't be the first year, maybe it'll be next year, you know, but I do think empowering these kids to have the voice and to bring this to the community will be probably part of that. I think hopefully naturally happens.
Dr. Brand.
Thank you for the great conversation and the comments. I mean, I think it's important to just take the opportunity to be mindful of the fact that, you know, this is, well, a new program that we didn't start, say, last school year with the forethought that we would be here. And you've heard the why and a recollection of that. It is very consistent with and aligned with our strategic plan and our mission as a district. And part of the subset of our mission, right, working to educate students in a collaborative, inclusive, and respectful learning environment. And so, while it's true that if one were to look at our strategic plan, they wouldn't find the No Place for Hate program currently. This is our response as one of many other endeavors to try and build that culture and those values and mission throughout our school district. So it should be. We can be responsive in that way, but this is one of many pieces that I think we're working very hard, as some of those programs have been mentioned in our efforts tonight. So for those watching at home, is this just a Band-Aid reaction to some unfortunate incidents? Not at all. Very much I would argue that this is part and parcel with our overall mission that we'll keep on keeping on. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for the update. We appreciate it. I think certainly we would all say whatever we can do to help and support, please let us know. And we'd like to have you back probably in the spring. Maybe some of the students can join.
That's my
give us an
hope.
update. So
That'd be awesome.
thank you very much.
And come
very
visit
much.
us at the
So
school.
much. I would love to.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, for item number E, first read of policies, we're actually going to push this off to a later meeting. We got some information late in the day from legal counsel that suggests a few additional edits after gathering some feedback
Yes.
from their colleagues in other districts. So this will go back to legal counsel, back maybe to the policy subcommittee, but we'll come back to the committee at some point
Yes.
later in the year. So that concludes new business and brings us to old business, which is the MASC resolutions.
It never ends.
So exciting.
2 more hours.
No.
Nick, do you want the original slideshow pulled up
Would you mind?
and the clip of the
meeting.
Yeah, this shouldn't take super long.
No, so I will say, while,
Challenge.
all right,
You
let's not devolve. While Nick gets ready, and I see Tracy brought this up already, thank you, Tracy. I did reach out to the MASC to ask to inquire about the expiring resolutions, sort of the role of this champion that we had talked about. Long story short, all of these expiring resolutions gained enough support from other districts that they'll be brought back at the conference in a couple of weeks. So we need to now discuss and determine what our position on those will be. So I also think we had one that we didn't decide on, right? Number 8.
one that's on the board right now.
Yep. Right. And so this one was about regional or non-regional school districts and transportation costs. And I am admittedly drawing a blank on where we left the conversation.
I think where we left the conversation, if I may, is kind of, we weren't sure whether this applied to us, to the extent to which it applied to us. I think actually Mr. Turner had some other like really insightful comments on this that I'm not recalling fully, but my takeaway again with this was just like, if there's a chance to get more money from the state, like why not, you know?
Mr. Exo?
I would have a very high degree of confidence that this would not apply to us.
Okay.
This was proposed by the Plymouth School Committee because Plymouth is the geographically largest town in the state, single town, 134 square miles. They've done things like this before. They had a proposal years ago that was specifically phrased in a way that it only applied to Plymouth. They were the only town that actually met the geographical distribution. And they have, I mean, Wilmington is 17 square miles, you know, give or take, and Plymouth is 134 square miles, and so they got bus routes and issues.
So
That's why this is here, but this would not affect us in any way.
So what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Ragsdale, is what we should do is we should do something where the specific square mileage of Wilmington is the size that a community can be to get more money from the state for buses. In that case, I think I'd switch the recommendation that we just do no action.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a little bit weird because this basically follows off of, there's a regional school district reimbursement for transportation, which was essentially an incentive from the state to encourage regionalization in districts because in our crazy New England state, you know, basically every town is like its own school district, and so trying to encourage a little bit of more efficiency in municipal services and so forth. But that's kind of what this is all about, that there are large regional districts that do get transportation reimbursement because some of them are like 250 square miles to cover, and so the transportation costs are exceedingly high. And Plymouth has, for a long time, been hoping to get some money from the state to cover some of its transportation costs.
So, if I may, I think looking back on the minutes from the last meeting and with Mr. Ragsdale's sort of addition, clarification, I think Mr. Golden had suggested we take no action because it doesn't seem as though this resolution would impact our district. And so I would suggest to us that that's probably the correct route. So, but I would certainly welcome any other discussion. Does anybody want to move to take no action on resolution number 8?
Uh,
All right, Mr. Golden, and seconded by Dr. Bryson. Is there other discussion? All in favor? Okay, so we will take no action on resolution number 8. That concludes the original resolutions, whatever we're calling them. Then there are 13 expiring resolutions. Last time, what we did, or in the previous meeting, what we did was we took the recommendation of the subcommittee, for the most part, and pulled out a few that we wanted to discuss. If we follow that same pattern, resolutions 2, 3, and 8 would be the ones that we want to discuss further. And those resolutions are pertaining to educator diversity and professional licensure, pertaining, that's the same one. Looks like, sorry? Okay.
I screwed up my
Full funding of transportation costs for student nope, hold on. Sorry, guys. Okay, so it looks like one of these is in here twice.
My apology, mea culpa.
So,
Go ahead.
Chair, can you, by the description here, so it sounds as though that there is, that these amendments, or rather that these resolutions will expire at the end of this year's delegate assembly, but the delegates have the ability to, I guess, renew them. It would be the idea. I didn't quite understand the part that you said that they said it had already received some kind of support to bring them back. Can you explain?
Yeah, so I reached out to Jason Fraser, who I think is on the resolutions subcommittee, but also I think is maybe the incoming president. And I reached out for some clarification, and he responded and said all of the resolutions that are up for readoption passed by wide margins the first time around, and recently had one or more school committees champion them for this upcoming delegate assembly in November to be readopted. So a number of committees, school committees from across the state, expressed their desire to have these brought back and continued, so that essentially they haven't achieved their stated goal, and they don't want them to die. They want them to sort of come back and be readopted. So that's happening this year at the conference.
Okay.
There's a criteria for bringing them back, and that it just was met.
Right.
I mean, I would be inclined to just en masse take no action on these and let them expire. I think that they've had their time, and I don't know that our time is well spent redebating resolutions that we in fact debated over the last 3 years already.
Any number of years, yep.
And have had the effect that they've been able to have, whatever that might have been.
Sure.
And nothing prevents MASC from being able to lobby in its lobby, in that capacity. So no one needs our approval in order to advocate for any of these items.
That's true.
And I simply think that this is not a productive use of the committee's time, and would recommend, maybe I'll hold off making a motion at this point, but would recommend that we simply pass over these expiring resolutions and take no action here.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
mean, I
Nick,
think
and then Jay.
the recommendations as written here were myself and Dr. Mercaldi just kind of going through them and kind of almost rehashing what the committee had done previously, because he had been there for the prior discussion. So I would not be opposed to that. I think that makes perfect sense. If they've got champions, we'll see if they keep moving. But it's fair to say lobbying organizations coming in with 10 asks are going to be far less productive than 3. So as members of the broader community of school committees, we'd be inclined to try to get them to be a little bit more specific.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith.
So, would whoever is the delegate from here to you,
Out of the Cape.
these will come up for a vote, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
And so do you need to know how we feel about these before you vote on them? Or are we assuming because we've deliberated on these for a while that you don't need, our input, or you can base it on what we've talked about in the past? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, so my thought was to go through them again and provide some guidance for Nick for when the delegate assembly takes place. David's point, and correct me if I'm misparaphrasing, is these essentially have had their time.
Mm-hmm.
We take no action. We don't support, we don't not support. We're just sort of
So at the delegate.
staining, essentially. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that I would maybe suggest, I guess, one of two possible ways of approaching it. One would be that essentially the delegate instruction is just to take no action or to vote, essentially no, not to renew these resolutions, but rather to just let them expire.
Sure.
Another option would be for us to basically just pull up what the committee's actions were originally on all of these and just go in with the same instructions, even though this is obviously a new committee, not the same membership that adopted the previous resolutions, but that would be another option, is just to advocate whatever we did originally.
Does that clarify? Or do you?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Turner.
So on the shortest possible answer is I'm aligned with continuing with what we had previously stated in prior years. And some of these go back several years, in part because while I hear that, a group coming in and advocating for 10 things is far less effective than one for 2 or 3. At a high level, all of these, as I read them, are at the very least good ideas, if not excellent ideas, if not things we should already be doing. So I have a hard time not suggesting that as a general idea, if we've supported them in the past, we should continue to support them, is where I'd land with that. I think the practical matter question would be, how does MASC actually lobby? Do they walk in with 15 things, or do they walk in with any different conversation? They're taking in 3, and then the next time they have a different conversation, they take in a different 3. And so part of it depends on how they do their job, which I don't need to get into those weeds. But at the point where I presume they're effective at their job, telling them we have this broad list of priorities and letting them figure out how to do their job, I'm okay with that. And so I'd be okay with carrying this forward if we've supported it in the past, continue to support, and unless there's a reason to say something different on the merits of the different resolutions, I would be inclined to continue forward on that. That's where I land with it.
I am admittedly torn because broadly speaking, I think I agree with kind of what David is saying, where sort of, these things have been here. They have been here for any number of years. Many of us have debated these a couple of times already. But I think a lot of them have some merit, so, I don't know. Yes, of course. Let's do this maybe a slightly different way. You're the delegate.
Yes.
What would be more helpful to you? Would you prefer us to go through these all individually and provide guidance like the other ones?
Even though there'd be a certain level of poetic justice to be being said down to the Cape and making you all go through this, and I think honestly the simplest way to save our time would be just to vote to make the same moves we did on these that you did before I was on the committee the last time this came up. I think it makes perfect sense. You already debated it. Why do it again? Save an hour.
We can just call MJ.
Well, I mean, yes, but jokes aside, I think we certainly could say, move to, I don't know, how to word it, take whatever action we took last time and then look them up and provide that information in advance of the assembly. So, Dr. Bryson and then Mr. Samaha.
I'm not sure I completely understand how this all works, I'll be honest, but looking at the expired resolutions, I'm quick glancing, I mean, we've glanced at them once before, I didn't put a ton of time into them because I figured there was nothing really to do with them, but I think I would be in support of all of them. So part of me is like, if someone wants to champion that and they want to keep going to make sure there's access to menstrual supply, like sure, go ahead. Like, I don't know if taking no action, I guess my question is, does that prevent someone from continuing to do that work? Or, because I don't want to stand in their way if they want to continue to champion it. I'm supportive of, I would say, all of them, really.
And I think, and not to put words in your mouth, but I get the impression that your recommendations were essentially based, for these ones, on what the committee's done in the past. So if I look at these, almost all of them, the recommendation is to support them. At least partly on what we did previously.
I mean, I was relying a lot on Dr. McCulty.
Sure.
I mean, he can't speak for himself in his absence, but, you know, it was, he had done a draft that he had kind of tagged each one and I then created a PowerPoint with spelling errors and repeated ones because it was in my hotel room in New York. But yes, it is broadly inspired by, I think, what you did before.
Okay. Mr. Samaha, Mr. Turner.
I guess I'm thinking it might make the most sense if we can look back at if somebody can look back, find out what our vote was, and if there are, and kind of like how we're doing the holding out, right? If there's any member who feels that they strongly disagree with the consensus of the committee in years past on these same issues, and feels like they want to advocate for their position, they have something really important to say about it, then maybe we can allow for that, rather than trying to rehash all of these different things. But for example, if resolution 1 is something that, so if Mr. Golden, for example, really feels passionate about number 1, that he actually thinks it should be different than what we all decided last year or the year before that, and he wants to add something to that conversation, I think that might be useful, because kind of like what Dr. Bryson is saying too, just because these are like sort of the old ones, like there's some of them are still, like, I'm in support of them. And I think that if, like, some of these might be ones that just because they're set to sort of like expire or whatever the term is, like, if there's enough support, like, maybe they do move forward. Maybe there's some shift in the makeup of the delegate assembly where some of these are going to move forward. And so I don't want to stand in that way. So I think what we should do is look at what our old votes were on this. And if anybody disagrees with that old vote, that we could talk about it. And I don't know, I mean, that's what I think is the correct approach.
Point of, I guess, calendar. This is our last meeting before the conference, before the delegate assembly.
Okay.
That would have been my point too.
So, I'll make a motion.
Please do.
I move that we do what we did, refer to our prior recommendations on these particular resolutions, and continue the same vote with the general understanding that there's at least some level of support of all of these sorts of resolutions within the committee.
Okay, so motion to essentially take the position on these expiring resolutions that we took previously. Yep. Okay, and Mr. Golden will second that. Is there any additional discussion on that? All those in favor? Unanimous.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. I will pull those votes and connect with
I was
you.
looking at the minutes and I was like, oh, geez.
Okay, that concludes old business. Moving us along to subcommittee reports. Hearing none. Correspondence this evening.
None this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Future school committee dates and other notable items. I'm going to add 2. On October 28th, we learned about the Parent Guardian University event that's coming up on navigating depression and anxiety. Also, on October 29th is middle school parent night here at the high school for the current 8th grade class. It's at 6 to 8 p.m. in the high school auditorium. Then, November 7th, 2024 is Elementary Literacy Information Night at 6 p.m. here in the large group instruction room. November 11th, the Wilmington High School Marching Band Veterans Day Ceremony at 11 a.m. on the Town Common. November 13th is our next regular school committee meeting at 7 p.m. here in this room. November 19th, the Wildwood School Building Committee is meeting at 6:30 p.m. here in this room. November 21st and 22nd, the Wilmington High School Lamplighters Drama Club 16 edition, 6:30 p.m. in the auditorium. November 23rd, the Lamplighters are performing at 1 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. in the auditorium. December 3rd, the Wilmington Middle School Chorus performance at 7 p.m., in the high school auditorium. Also, December 3rd, the Wildwood School Building Committee will be meeting at 6:30 p.m. here in this room. And on December 4th is our next regular school committee meeting, 7 p.m. here in this room.
Jesse, just a note, because I didn't put it on the list, the Wildwood School Building Committee meetings are actually hybrid.
Hybrid.
So district calendar and the project website have all the information and links.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
November 5th, there will be no school.
That's a good one, thank you. November 5th is Election Day, and Election Day this year, we have no school in the district.
We spent 3 meetings talking about that, come on.
Anything else?
Just joking.
With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Dr. Bryson, second. Mr. Golden, all those in favor? Unanimous. Good evening, good night, thank you very much.